Sign up for WynnBET Sportsbook at WYNNBet.com today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're continuing on in our 25th year of Ravens history, or 25 years of Ravens history podcast, where we look back at various aspects. And I know we're not looking for the Mount Rushmores in this thing. We're not looking for lists of greatest Ravens ever. What we're trying to do is look at some of the trends and some of the interesting players and some of the great stories that may have been forgotten, some of the individual games. So if you have an idea for one, please give me a call. Tonight, have a great guest for you, Ed Lupp. Ed, how you doing?
Life's good. Is that what we say around here?
That's a good one. You're not stealing my thing because Josh has to ask me for me to say it, so that's great. Ed came to me and said, hey, why don't we talk about the plan behind the 2018 draft? I think it's a great thing. Obviously, that 2018 draft was one of the greatest in NFL history, I'd say, at this point.
It better be. Or it turned out that way for a couple of the guys. We'll get to them.
All right. So a lot of stories behind this draft. Obviously, Ozzie Newsome's last as a Raven. But Ed, why don't you take us through and kind of how you want to lay this out for us?
I want to point out the irony that you were talking about, let's say, Ravens greats, and yet Lamar Jackson is in this draft and kind of the focal point of this draft, actually. It was a big highlight. ESPN took about an hour for it. So the draft actually started with what was ultimately going to be pick number 16 with Hayden Hurst, which didn't turn out to be Hayden Hurst. It turned out to be a series of trade backs. I'm sure you remember that. And I think there was a certain player that you and I were both screaming for at that point.
Yeah, we both wanted Derwin James. I felt he's a player you rebuild your defense around if you can get him, even if he didn't exactly match what the Ravens needed at the time. But he was a player I loved. And I thought the other guy, in fact, was in this draft that matched those characteristics was Minkah Fitzpatrick, who'd already been taken. And another guy a lot of other teams liked was Terrell Edmonds, who was also available when the Ravens selected at 16. Not who I would have picked, but was a player a lot of other teams picked for that could have been traded for value, I thought.
And I certainly agree with that. So I do remember that Eric DaCosta later said in an interview, if Hayden Hurst wasn't ultimately the selection, it would have been Derwin James at 16. But the value prop was too good, so they moved back, and then Hayden Hurst becomes the first selection in this draft, who is no longer with the Ravens.
Yeah, a lot of people wanted a wide receiver. There's a lot of screaming on draft day for that Calvin Ridley and DJ Moore were both guys that would be good. And they would have still had a chance at Ridley at 25 when they drafted. 25, right? I think that's right.
That's correct.
But I think Ridley might have been drafted 26, but DJ Moore, I believe, had already been drafted in the top 22, 23 range. And anyway, didn't have a chance at him. But there is one common characteristic that you and I are both very familiar with, Ed, is that everybody wants wide receivers in round one, or skill position players in general.
They tend to, but what actually happened is this draft started a trend that happened for the next 3 years where the Ravens double dipped in wide receivers. So they later would pick Jaleel Scott and Jordan Lasley, who was my guy. And it didn't turn out so well, unfortunately. I guess practice squad heroes are okay.
His football ended up the same way with Yertle the turtle ended up in the bottom of the pond. So
great analogy.
Yeah, there you go. So you got that. You've got kids. There you go.
How many of your listeners are can relate to that one? I gotta wonder.
Don't know.
So, hey, that's okay. So this actually became an offensive-centric draft for the top 4 in comparison to what 2017 was, which was defensive-oriented for the same style. Whereas, like, the year before, there was Humphrey, Bowser. I think Tim Williams was in there. I don't even know if he's in the league anymore.
Yeah, I don't know either, actually. He was on somebody's practice squad or team last year. According to this, Tim Williams is still in the league, but I'm not sure where he's playing at present.
Okay. So then let's say the shift happens to where we're going to go all offense, and it's going to basically steer clear of, let's say, Joe Flacco or complement him in some ways until the Lamar Jackson offense comes into play. So after the big trade up with Philadelphia, I recall, to get to 32, they pick Lamar Jackson, and I think the entire NFL knows that story at this point.
Yeah, one thing that's an interesting component of this is whether or not the Ravens really needed to hold on to some of the draft capital from the 2 trade downs that led eventually to Hurst in order to trade up to get Jackson. And in truth, they traded their second-round pick from this year and their second-round pick from 2019 to move up to get it. So they wouldn't have needed it directly for Jackson. They might not have had draft capital for a Brown or an Andrews later if they had, pulled the trigger on Derwin James at number 16.
I sense the same thing as well. And I believe also a couple of the teams that ended up within those trades had a trade via, as they would say, where they parlayed it backwards.
There you go. All right. So I'm sorry. We get to the 3rd round, another big round for the Ravens, and they pick 2 guys, Orlando Brown and Mark Andrews, obviously both great value selections.
Yes, and it turns out that actually Orlando Brown obviously now in the Chiefs, and he was picked 10 spots after the Chiefs picked Derek Nottie. So this could have actually happened the other way around, but it didn't. And it actually worked, I guess, to both teams' favors.
It certainly worked to the Ravens' favor to get Orlando Brown for these years. I think that's fair to say, and to get good value out of him in a trade. Brings us to one of the other things about this draft is the Ravens had such a historically great draft with 12 total picks, and 9 of them are really fine players for somebody at this point. It might be more than that, actually, but the Ravens had to unstack this draft in terms of contracts because you can't sign that many guys to second contracts at one point.
I feel like there's a big contract.
Yeah.
Yes, the big contract, Zach Sealer, right?
Yeah, he was the first. There you go of the guys to get a second contract. Did it with Miami. So deep in defensive depth that the Ravens tried to move him to the practice squad and didn't get away with it. And unfortunately, that's been the way with a number of Ravens linemen over the years.
And if we were to let's say back up in the draft, there's a gentleman that is playing now for a second contract, Anthony Averett, and he's probably going to get it.
Probably he's a good chance to get it, but I mean, you talk through the guys. Lamar Jackson is not necessarily on the same year as everybody else because he actually has a 1-year deferral with the 5th-year option. But if you look at the other players, Orlando Brown was scheduled to get a contract. Mark Andrews certainly is already signed. Anthony Averett is in position to get it. Kenny Young was, of course, traded. I don't think that he is an obvious second contract player, although the Rams may certainly think so now. Deshaun Elliott, now a chance to get a second contract. Greg Sinnott now is playing well for the Browns in the preseason. And, he's a developmental player, so this is about the time where he should be coming around. Of course, Bradley Bozeman, we probably think he should be re-signed with the Ravens, or at least I do.
And I agree with you. They should pay him actually a decent amount of money. Because even if something happens with the center position, he's still the best pulling guard on the team.
Yeah, I think that's true right now. I do like Cleveland's athleticism, but we don't need to go into that. I love what Bozeman has done, and I think he's very deserving of a second contract. I wonder if the Ravens are going to be able to afford all the players they'd like to, but Bozeman is certainly deserving.
I agree, 100%.
So we were talking about a deeper plan with this. I think that was part of the show idea is that it was also Ozzie handing over the reins to DaCosta.
Yes, and I see it as kind of, let's say, a twofold thing because Greg Roman was on his way to Baltimore, and Greg Roman's offense was not built for Joe Flacco, at least unless he's insanely fast and nobody knows. That'd be amazing. But, that's okay. So with 2 of the first 4 picks, they've got 2 tight ends. And that is the big thing in the Baltimore offense is running just a bunch of tight ends. New England is probably the only rival to that, and they don't run the same style of offense. So when we think, okay, the reins are going to be handed over, DeCosta is going to have basically a front line to work with as opposed to building backwards from the defense, like it's been tradition for that secondary.
Yeah, and a very unusual period for the Ravens to take 4 consecutive offensive players with a trade up included and 2 tight ends, a tackle, and a quarterback. That's a lot of offense, and we've been the beneficiaries as Ravens fans of a historically efficient offense these last 3 years, really, 2019 through 21 now. And the reason is, Lamar Jackson and the other players from that 2018 draft are really at the heart of it.
Yeah, and I'd say it more boils down to just time of possession. It's as if they figured it out. If we just keep the ball, we don't need this many people on defense.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely true, because I express always efficiency on offense in terms of points per drive and time of possession. Of course, if you allow the opponent fewer drives, you win. You can win that way too with the same number of points. But in terms of points per drive, they've been among the historic teams, not just good, not just league leading, but they've really been historic over the last 2 years. Even though they didn't have what was apparently a great year in 20 or anything, they're still 9th in the league in points per drive. They've been number 1 over the last 2 years combined by a fair amount. I think it's something like by 0.14 points per drive over that period. So, I think if you're not appreciating the Lamar Jackson offense right now, get on the bus. It's time to get on board and really understand just how valuable he's been. A lot of people might take that to mean some other sort of bus that people should get on. I'm not saying that.
Man, that's debatable, yeah. But at the very least, it's good that you recognize the points per drive. And I think that actually was a key number in the analytics that DeCosta really likes. And I'm sure that has been communicated downwards to Harbaugh and the coaching staff is preach the analytics and follow the numbers, and you're going to get the results you want.
Yeah, they've been very forward thinking in terms of their willingness to go for it on 4th down and all that. I think that they've been ahead of the curve. We saw it again on Monday night in terms of going forward on 4th and 1 in their own territory, which is frankly an incredibly obvious mathematical decision. But
thank you.
It's been pointed out by a number of people that the NFL is not there yet. That they don't all look at it that way, and they look at the risk of being wrong about something like that, and going to lose the game. But I think, in truth, if he hadn't have gone for it, and the analytics people have come out and really shown that, hey, it's about 25 percentage points better chance to win the game, Harbaugh, if they had lost that game by punting, should have really been raked over the coals for it.
I agree. And I don't think that the account is active anymore on Twitter, but it used to actually measure the cowardness of a punt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they do still do that. They have the most cowardly punts of the year and whatnot, but this would have been one of the most cowardly punts. For
absolutely.
Sure.
Great follow, by the way.
Yeah. All right, so let's keep talking plan, and I want this to be your presentation here of how you want to talk about this. What's next about this plan?
I think what's next actually is with the second contract analysis. So we've got, Deshaun Elliott as well, playing really well, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we drafted him in the 6th round. Is this a value prop sort of thing? Or were they just thinking, you know what, he's just the best available, let's develop him?
It's a good question, because we didn't see his development occur in the normal manner because he missed his first 2 years. So whatever he was learning at the facility in the meeting room maybe, but not, in terms of on-field live fire for most of those first 2 years.
I didn't actually remember that. I'm glad you did.
He's a player that I would love to see the Ravens sign long term, and I think given his injury history, he's the kind of guy that's perfect for this sort of thing. Bozeman probably is too. Skura honestly was as well. A guy who can see the value and a divisible benefit, and it's not clear that he's going to make a ton of money if he goes to free agency. So instead, you want to make sure you get some kind of second contract remuneration, and that usually is good for both sides. He gets a security of maybe a 3-year, $10 million deal, let's say, instead of trying to really break the bank for $6 or $7 million a year, or probably not that much, but $5 to $7 million a year maybe, if he goes at the end of this year.
I think 5's more reasonable if he pushes the market. And honestly, I think that for what the Ravens have offered, especially with the Justin Houston comment of it's different here in Baltimore, or it's better for that matter, then, I mean, he talks to him. I think he'll stay.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Right now, the Ravens so pushed up against the cap, it's probably gonna have to wait till the end of the year, is my guess. But definitely, I'd be very excited to hear that he were done. Who of the players? Who's the next most important to sign? Obviously, Lamar's number one. Andrews is already done. Who in your order among Averett, Elliott, and Bozeman, who I think we'd agree are the next three biggest? What's your 1, 2, 3 of those?
Bozeman, number one.
I'm on board with Bozeman number one. And then would you Elliott or Averett, which one is more important to sign?
Averett now. If Elliott was, let's say, replacing Clark with the green dot, I'd actually flip it.
Okay, that's a great point. And Elliott right now, I think would be the next guy with the green dot as the lineup is right now. I think it's going to stay at safety. So it really would have to be either Elliott or Stevens who got the green dot next if anything happened to Clark. Don't even want to think about it, frankly, because Clark I think has done so much. But yeah, I don't see it going to inside linebacker at this point.
I feel like Chris Collinsworth would argue with you because all last week he kept saying that Brandon Stevens was all over the field, and he meant it in a positive manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I didn't see it that way.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I might be agreeing with Collinsworth that if I'm saying that I think Stevens would be in line after Elliott to get. Elliott's been here for several years, so he would clearly be first. But if there were a problem with both of them, I think they'd go ahead and give it to Stevens. I don't think they'd give it to an inside linebacker because I think Wink values that versatility.
When's the last time a rookie had the green dot?
No team can afford to overpay for talent. Build a championship team with Indeed, the smart way to only pay for quality candidates that meet your must-have requirements. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in just one place. Indeed knows how important it is to make the most of your recruiting hours and dollars. And with Indeed, you can save time and money by setting your must-have qualifications and only pay for the quality candidates that meet them. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/BlueWire. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/BlueWire. Indeed.com/BlueWire. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey guys, looking for a betting advantage this football season? You need to download BetQL, the only app you'll need to compare betting odds and make smart bets. Their best bet computer model scans over 350,000 unique bets per year to give you a best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports and gives you the reasoning behind why you should place the bet. Their model covers everything from spreads, over-unders, and player prop bets. Don't want to use this model and prefer to do the research yourself? Well, BetQL has all the necessary tools for your betting research needs. Tools like line movement and sharp data on who the pros are backing, team summaries highlighting previous success against the spread and over-under, team lineup breaking news and injury status updates, and leaderboards to track how you stack up against others and to view your winning streaks. Better data, better bets. Head to the App Store or Google Play Store now to download BetQL. You can also head to try.betql.co/BlueWire to get started now. Enter the discount code BlueWire at payment checkout for 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Make sure to check out their offers page to find a special offer to receive a full free year of BetQL. Don't miss out on the chance to gain your betting advantage during this football season.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
Mosley?
Not Ray Lewis. So I got to think back. Mosley got the green dot in about the 6th game of the year. He got it at Tampa Bay in 2014. So, yeah, I think he was the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody else. Owasso, Weddle had it. Clark got it as not a rookie. Yeah, there isn't anybody else.
Got it. So I guess in relation to the Mosley bring up, is Kenny Young an interesting pick in this draft? Because he wasn't on the team very long. He got traded. And I think he was viewed as the coverage linebacker that I know that you have long desired for this organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have a coverage linebacker, but basically I don't want to invest heavily in terms of draft capital on a 3-down linebacker. But Young came with that reputation, and honestly, I think what he really was more of a fast downhill player, more in the mold of Patrick Queen, where he was good coming downhill and fast, good sideline to sideline speed, but never really developed the chops to be a guy who would understand what's going on behind him.
That's unfortunate. And I wish I also could remember what they got for him in return. I'm hoping that
that was Marcus Peters. He was part of the Marcus Peters trade.
So, the flip for Peters.
Yeah. So it was certainly of value that they got there. That's part of the reason I think that Averett is such an important re-sign at this point now is, are you a little afraid that Marcus Peters might have played his last game as a Raven, given what his contract is next year? Yeah, he's the last money they can access, I believe, in terms of cap, and they could restructure somebody, so they've got other levers they could pull that they'd probably do first, but they could extend Peters or move some bonus forward, so he would or create some bonus, so he would create a little bit of cap this year, and they haven't done it yet, and I think that might kind of be telling as well.
I agree, and you know what though, with Wink's, let's say, emphasis on dime defense, Averett just makes too much sense. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I really also like what Wink's complicated pass rush does, how Peters is able to take advantage of that, particularly against some quarterbacks who are a little bit jittery. Yes. And, he reads that very well. And the interception against Wilson, the one in Cincinnati, the one against the Rams when Goff was there. In 2019, all very much taking advantage of a quarterback who it wasn't really very keen on holding the football for an extended period.
I could also go down memory lane further back and say I think there was a draft when the Ravens wanted Marcus Peters and they ended up with this guy named Rashad Perryman.
Yeah, that wasn't great, but he didn't last until the Ravens were there. It's not like the kind of it's not the pain of Derwin James. It's the pain of thinking, well, what if we traded up? And then you have to think, well, it probably would have been a lot to trade up.
It would have been, yes.
All right. So is there another component in terms of the plan in this draft that this was Ozzie handing over the reins to DeCosta in a different way? I can make one point about this is that I really like the fact that the last 2 players in this draft were small school picks. Actually not 2 of the last 3, I guess. Greg Sinat.
Stop lying. Alabama.
And Zach Sealer. Yes. Yeah. And Zach Sealer. Were 2 small school picks from Wagner and where do you go to? Ferris State.
Yeah. D2 somewhere in whatever
Michigan
place. Yeah. Well, where I'm from, they keep calling it the state up north or something akin to that. You're not allowed to say that.
All right. The enmity is strong. Got it. I thought that of those 2 picks kind of as the first 2 picks of the DeCosta era, because it's really his small school scouting program that was so prevalent during Ozzie's time and got us so many good young players like Lardarius Webb and whatnot, Brandon Williams, who were, lesser known prospects.
Yes. And if I remember, there's something that DeCosta said when he took over the draft in 2019 is that day 3 is reserved for scouts. He calls it Scout Day, and it's pound the table day, meaning when you find your guy, you pound the table for your guy no matter what, and we're going to hear you out. And I kind of feel like at some point, Sinat and Sealer were one of those guys that a couple scouts did the same thing for.
Yeah, I don't doubt that for a second, and it's certainly the strength it's been. It's very cool to see those guys pick. This is in 2021 draft. The 2021 draft, they didn't take any small school guys, and that really bothered me because I'm looking at them saying, hey, this should be the acid test for what DaCosta believes in terms of his own scouts, his own scouting ability personally, to identify small school talent, which hasn't really played. And we had a few guys taken, a couple of North Dakota guys and the Wisconsin Whitewater lineman, Miners, I think it is, and then the Northern Iowa guy, the tackle, Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown was Buffalo,
right?
I thought Northern Iowa, but maybe I have the wrong guy.
I meant the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. You're probably correct. There's a Buffalo University. So
there is, correct, yeah.
All right. Anyway, what else about that 18 draft? I mean, obviously a magical thing, thoroughly worth reveling in. And yet, is there anything else about that draft that you would want to talk about?
Honestly, I just wish it would have panned out for the wide receivers, because I know that Ravens flock loves the wide receivers, and then the luck just didn't happen this year. They had to wait on.
Yeah, it was kind of a bummer. A couple college guys who had some good hands there for certain. Jordan Lasley, a really disappointing kind of tale at the NFL level, because it wasn't just in Baltimore that he bombed out in terms of, flaked out, I'll say, in terms of throwing the ball into the pond. And I don't know what other issues there were, but once you see that, you kind of wonder. And I don't remember what the other reported issue was in Oakland, too, when he got cut there.
I guess they must have found out he partied with Josh Rosen or something.
Okay, I'm not going to touch that one. Ed, really appreciate having you on the show here. Great to talk football with you always, my friend, and you're welcome on anytime, of course. But tell folks where they can find your work and what you do on Twitter in particular.
On Twitter, I mostly at this point now just give off the ball commentary about football, boxing. Love me some boxing. Big fights this weekend, by the way. So make sure you tune in for DAZN, and technically UFC has a pay-per-view. So wait, this podcast will air after that.
It'll air soon.
All right. Well, just bet the house on Valentina and call it a day. How about that?
All right. So this. We'll just say right now, this is being recorded at 9:25 at 12:58 a.m. right now.
Thank you.
And that's when he's making that prediction. If this happens to air,
she's a minus 1,200 favorite, and it's.
Okay, just too good. Yeah. Wait, you would ever really tell someone to bet the house on a minus 1,200?
You know what? For this matchup, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. It seems like I've lived through Tyson Douglas, and so have you. That fight seems like it was yesterday. Here's what's really weird about that. The fight was in Japan, famously, and of course, yes. Tyson a prohibitive favorite. The very next day, also in Japan, RG3 was born. That gives you an idea of just how freaking old we are. Okay, because wow. RG3, noted broadcaster RG3 at this point.
Very good, yes.
Yes, was born the day after the fight. That fight seems like it was yesterday to me. My life has passed me by in just this way.
Yesterday to you, then when I look at the highlights of it on, YouTube or something, it's all like a grainy feed, and I'm like, wow, when did this air?
Yeah. How many times have you watched that fight?
Probably 5 at least. And I did watch the 30 for 30 they had on it, or something very similar to that.
All right. Very cool. Glad to hear you're a boxing fan. I still enjoy it once in a while, although the heavyweights aren't what they used to be. Ed, again, thanks for coming on.
Can I ask you one more thing, Ken?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
What is the deal with how your theme song came about? Did you make that?
The theme song at the beginning of the show?
Yeah. And how you're going to close it out.
Josh picked it out. I really have no idea, where we got it. You like the sound?
Yeah, it's actually catchy. And I'm like, I bet you they were just fiddling around with some stuff, and they just came up with it on their own.
There was no work I did on it, so I'm not sure exactly where Josh Brooks cured it, but I'm sure
it's a golden opportunity to take credit for it.
All right, Ed. Great to talk to you, buddy, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
Sign up for WynnBET Sportsbook at WYNNBet.com today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
What's up, everyone? It's NFL Hall of Fame wide receiver Chris Carter. And yes, I'm back, and I'm hosting a new podcast called Wide Receiver One, presented by Blue Wire and WynnBET. I'm going to be talking to some of the best wide receivers in the game today about every topic that is related to football, but more importantly, the personal struggles. We're going to dive deeper into the man underneath the helmet, who he is, who he once was, and who he wants to become. Listen to me, NFL Hall of Famer Chris Carter, on Wide Receiver One on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast.